It's 6 o'clock. I'm going to begin. I don't have much to say tonight, but I would like to read a short written statement. I'll be submitting my resignation as president of the board effective at 5 p.m. tomorrow, April 1st, 2020. But no one should be mistakenly confident that my resignation is a solution to the problems of this homeowners association or a victory for anyone in Semiahmoo. Solving long-term problems requires a larger commitment to continuity than has been invested in the SRA. I've been a board member for 2.5 years, and I have served with 19 different board members. 4 of them left for health reasons, 1 of them left of her own accord, and 1 of them is dead. One thing I know about the current board is that they are team players and they have a great deal of concern about the vital issue of continuity. I'm deeply troubled by the tone and character of most of the recent comments and statements from those who spoke at the last 2 town halls. It seems to me that disagreements about direction and process can and should be conducted in the open, with all parties having knowledge enough to understand the issues being debated. What we've heard these last few weeks is not the Semiahmoo that any of us saw when we decided to come here, or that we want now. Questions and answers are far more effective than advancing accusations, discrediting board members, and complaining about imaginary fears about what dire events will transpire in the future. Whether you agree with the board or not, there should be no room for governance by petition, misinformation, speculation, threats, false accusations, name calling, or yes, even vandalism. All of these behaviors derive from distortions or misrepresentations of what is true or real. We are all volunteers who stepped up when asked, and we have all served to the best of our ability. We all saw problems and tried to do something about them. That doesn't call for accusations of bad faith, breach of our duty of care, misappropriation of funds, and violations of the law. The board has diligently followed the law and its own disjointed SRA documentation, which, by the way, is in many ways a hodgepodge of multiple past development deals that go back over 30 years. I took the role of a board member reluctantly, but the job has been my priority every day for the last 2.5 years. Having stated the foregoing, I recognize that all of the myriad issues of real concern have fallen behind a newly focused priority for my removal as president. Yeah, that's hurtful. And yeah, that's hard to address in a rational discussion of real issues. I am personally proud of what I and my colleagues on the board have accomplished in the last 2 years. Some of those things include finishing a conceptually and operationally flawed building project, settling a lawsuit by a resident against the SRA for enforcing your view control policy, establishing a strategic plan, improving the SRA relationship with the city of Blaine, negotiating an agreement to repair the neglected and failed Carnoustie bioswale without using any of your money, improving the governance structure of the association, and literally dozens of other smaller but important issues. All wrapped up together, I think these efforts will provide a good foundation for the board to deliver a more effective governance, better education, improved awareness of responsibilities, and a much improved organizational structure for the association. Nevertheless, there comes a time when good news and accomplishment is obscured by rhetoric, lack of knowledge, and personal attack. My perception this evening is that there is so much dissension, anger, and fear now focused on me personally that I believe this is the appropriate time for me to step out of the way and let this talented group of people who are now your board do the work they understand needs to be done. I have agreed to stay on the board for the next few months to transition everything I have learned, every project that is in process, and the actual leadership of the board to other directors. Thank you who have understood the explanations of issues over the last couple of years. Thanks to you who listened to what has been communicated by the board. A huge volume of information has gone out. I have very much appreciated the opportunity to have served this incredible community, and I wish you all good fortune. Doug Woods, it's your meeting.
Thank you, Alec. As the SRA Vice President, I'll be standing in for Alec until the new president is selected. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And by way of announcement, what Alec alluded to, the SRA staff has received signed petitions calling for a special meeting to be held on May 6th via Zoom at 3 p.m. It is at this time unofficial. However, staff and board will work diligently through the process that is required in our governing document so that the meeting can officially occur. In addition, another bit of information, board members and members of the communications committee are going to be hosting 3 focus groups. Those will be 3 meetings intended to be smaller groups to take in-depth looks at various different topics. The 3 that are scheduled so far are finance, which will be led by Joe, Sophie. That's going to be April 3rd at 3 p.m. and again on April 12th at 6 p.m. in the Palmer Room at the Country Club building. There'll be one on April 7th regarding architectural standards. That'll be at 4 o'clock in the SRA building. And then the Joint Partners Consultancy will be discussed April 7th at 3 p.m. And that location is still up in the air. It'll be announced and there'll be additional information sent out about these focus groups. So tonight's meeting is going to be a bit different than it's been in the past. It's going to be a two-way conversation. But before we jump into that, let me first set the tone. I believe that all of us here tonight are here for the same reason. We love and share the same vision and desires for this idyllic corner of the world we call home, Semiahmoo. Being part of a homeowners association is a lot like being part of a rowing crew. You know, we're all in the same boat, we're all pulling the oars in the same direction, but from time to time, we need to make a bit of a course change and improve coordination. And that's what tonight's really all about. And so that's what, so that we're all stepping out on the same foot so that we're all in step with one another. Let's all recognize that the passion for our community is not a bad thing. And we've seen a lot of passion over the course of the last couple of months. We'll never all agree on everything. But with that said, I hope frustration never again rises to the level that inspires petitions and angry social media posts. One other thing before we get to the business of the day is that I want to thank Alec for the tireless and undying commitment to our community. Leading change is never easy. I know of no one else that would have had the energy to respond so valiantly to the challenges that have confronted this community. From his early involvement on the board a little over 2.5 years ago, he spent most of his waking hours settling major challenges and solving problems that would have overwhelmed most of us mortals. But not Alec, he's not a quitter. Occasionally, he might be a bit of a lightning rod from time to time, but he's never a quitter. So I say to you, Alec, Semiahmoo is a better place for all you have done, and we thank you. I'd like to thank his wife, Susan, as well, because we all know public service is never a solo act. So thank you, Susan, and we apologize for the many dinners and cold evenings and the dinners that got cold and the evenings spoiled when Alec was called to duty. So to the business at hand. As you know, this board is mostly new this year. Steve Geisel, Steve Haynes, and I came on at the first of the year along with Helen Worley, who was appointed as a non-voting director due to her role as chairman of the elections committee. At the last meeting, the board elected 2 new directors, that makes 6 in total new directors. That's Jeff Ferry and Joe Southey to fill vacancies due to the resignations by Paul Greeno and Mike Hayden. Jeff is a newcomer to Semiahmoo, having moved in a 1.5 years ago. He brings to the board an impressive career in international development financing. And by the way, Jeff grew up in Bellingham. And probably one of the people that left many of the divots that Steve was out filling today. Our other new director is Joe Southey. Joe is a 15-year Semiahmoo resident, and he and his wife Connie and son Carson are likely familiar to many of you. Joe, a CPA, brings to the board a 30-year career in accounting and financial management, along with a track record of success and accomplishment. Both Jeff and Joe were board elected to fill vacancies, so their initial terms expire at the end of this year. It is our hope they will both stand for re-election next fall as they bring important and valuable experience and perspective to this board. We currently have one more board's position to fill. This is a vacancy created with when Kurt Hagman completed his 6-month commitment to be treasurer last fall. We're hoping to fill a seat at the board meeting next month. So if you are inspired to join the board and to help make a difference, please let Helen Worley know. You can contact her through the SRA office. As I mentioned at the beginning, tonight's meeting is going to be quite a bit different than the last 2 town halls. At the first 2, we wanted to provide a report on the progress that we've made in dealing with the deficiencies which have been identified, and that we're working diligently to address community concerns. We recognize that everyone was frustrated by the lack of two-way exchange to a person, so was everybody on the board. So tonight, and as we move forward with future town halls and focus groups, we are going to have open two-way discussion. And let's not forget, we don't have to limit this to be just about frustrations and concerns. There's a lot of good things happening in Semiahmoo to talk about, and a lot more to come in the future. So with that, we're going to do a little something different tonight. I'd like to introduce Russ Crawford. Russ and his wife Laura have been Semiahmoo residents for 9 years and live in Drayton Hillside. Laura is a past board member and a member of the Women's Club. Russ has volunteered this evening to facilitate the meeting. Russ will lay out the revised and much simplified rules and will help coach us through the evening. So with that, Russ, thank you, and the meeting is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Doug, and it's good to be with everybody tonight. When I was asked to facilitate the meeting this evening, it's not because of any special skills that I have. Unlike everybody else that's on this Zoom call, Semiahmoo is a wonderful place to live, and as I've seen what's been unfolding over the past period of time, it is disconcerting to see when there is concern among the community, dissent among the community. I am an independent individual tonight. I have not signed in on one thing or another. I'm really here to facilitate, because I strongly believe whenever we're in a situation like we are, there's aspects on both sides of everybody's discussion. There's a need to just have a very open dialogue and listen to each other, be respectful of each other. And that's what I do ask everybody to do tonight. And so in terms of the approach we're going to take, somewhat similar to what you had in your last town hall, but I'm going to give a little bit more leeway. And that said, I am going to make sure everybody has a chance to speak that wants to speak. What we're going to do is ask everybody to limit their comments to 5 minutes. Again, if somebody else wants to cede 5 minutes to them, we'll allow that. If we get through everybody that wants to speak, if somebody else wants to speak again towards the end, that's going to be absolutely fine. But do be respectful to give everybody an opportunity to put forth any questions they have, comments they have. I am going to allow, if there's a question, somebody wants to put up their hand and ask a question, we'll do that, try to make it more interactive. And one thing I will tell you is we will end by 8 p.m. I am respectful of everybody's time, and I've always said with all the meetings I've run over the years, I begin on time, I end on time, and be respectful of everybody's time. And the other thing I would suggest is don't repeat a lot of things that have already been said, unless you want to emphasize something. Again, it's to be a very open dialogue. And just a little bit of my background. So again, this is not my expertise necessarily, but I've been with KPMG, which is one of the big 4 accounting firms, for 40 years, 30 with the US firm, 10 with the Canadian firm. I was last in Canada actually on March 11th a year ago, believe it or not, and wrapping up this year to retire. My background is international corporate taxation. So some of the things we're going to talk about today is not my expertise. So again, I am here to be a facilitator, really an independent in that regard. So with that in mind, I think what we're going to do is basically open the floor to anybody that would like to initially speak. Lori, like the last time, is going to be the one monitoring who puts their hand up. If anybody wants to cede time to anybody else, I'll be keeping time. And again, as you get close to the end of your 5 minutes, I'll let you know. I don't have a bell to ring. Sorry, Helen, but I am going to keep us, on time. And don't feel like you have to use the full 5 minutes that you have. Be succinct, to the point, but again, we want everybody to put their issues, thoughts on the table. So on that, I'm going to open it up for anybody that has any questions, and then we'll direct it to the board members for whoever is appropriate to answer. Lori?
Okay, David Eulis will be up first.
Okay.
The main purpose of my comments tonight are to thank Alec for the honor of having worked with him for the last 2 years, to express my thanks for the thousands of hours he's put in, to appreciate how straightforward and honest he's been, and the amount of commitment that he made to this community. He already talked about some of his achievements. I just think about the things that we worked on together with the board for the last couple of years. They include, completion of the admin building. They include straightening out the financial management systems that we had. And I know we're still working on some of that, resolving a lot of the outstanding human resources challenges that we've had, putting together the strategic plan, starting to put together a volunteer structure that we never had before. I mean, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the board was actually pretty much anti-volunteer. We now got a situation where we have organized, structured committees of community members who are going to make a massive difference to how our community operates and functions. Alec drove all of that. That's wonderfully appreciated. The need to build the competency of our staff, the need to provide them with the right training, for the right equipment, to meet our legal obligations for the care and training of our staff. For the first time, to actually organize training for board members. Training historically in this organization has been a 4-inch thick binder of paper, which we hoped somebody would look at. For the first time, people have actually had an opportunity to learn what the responsibilities are to be a board member. Alec drove that. The whole issue of compliance with the SRA and the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, CCNRs, still a work in progress, but at least we now know that it's a requirement. It's something we have to do. We've been in legal jeopardy because of our lack of attention to that particular area. We now have processes underway. We have documentation on what that means and what we need to do, what the outstanding issues are. Alec drove that. He got us through the pandemic, kind of, sort of, at least those of us now vaccinated feel like we kind of gotten through it. That was an enormous challenge. Nobody ever did that before. Alec led us through that process. When I look at where we're at right now compared to where we were at 2 years ago, it's enormous progress, but still a lot of work to be done. I'm happy to see the kind of people that are now on the board, making the kind of commitment with the kind of background and experience they have. I think they can solve a lot of the problems that we have been faced with, but there's still a long way to go. To me, the number one issue, and Alec's been focused on that, is meeting our legal obligations. It isn't how often we clean the streets. It isn't how long it takes to resolve a CCNR issue, unless it's a legal obligation. The amount of money we have to spend is going to be based on understanding our legal obligations based through our CCNRs, both neighborhood and SRA, and understanding what we have to do in order to meet our obligation to maintain and improve homeowner property values, which we have not been doing. Anyway, Alec has driven us through that. He's been a pleasure to work with, as well as the other members of the board. I appreciate that. Anyway, Alec, I just want to thank you very much for the time. Great guy. Love you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay. Lori, who do we have next in line?
Dave Whitmore.
No.
Dave?
Get me unmuted here.
There we go.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on a statement that Doug Woods made in the latest SRA Director's Corner email. And since I have a couple extra minutes, I would like to comment that this is not intended to be a ding on Doug. It's only a clarification of his intent is all I'm looking for. So anyway, the quote that he made was that he wrote that the treasurer, quote, will look at how to start replacing reserves that were required for the ASC building, end quote. When I read this, I was taken aback as to why Doug had the impression that SRA reserves required replacing for the ASC building. I will assume for purposes of this comment that the ASC building Mr. Woods referred to is the SR building and property. The SRA building and property mortgage plus some annual upgrades is around 10% or less of the assessment income received from residents. I think most homeowners would be happy to have a mortgage equal to or less than 10% of their annual income. Also, the funds for the SRA building and property did not impact our overall year-end cash reserves as implied. This is a great investment that will only increase in value and provide a payback over time by avoiding ever increasing rental costs. We, the owners, have a very impressive $1 million plus asset we can be proud of for many years to come. So my question to Doug is, why did you imply in your letter that SRA building has depleted our reserves, or that they need rebuilding, as you put it? And I would also like to comment, in the past 2 town halls, my comment responses from the board have been rather unpleasant due to either missing the point I was trying to make or misinterpreting my intent. So I would request an opportunity for a brief response following board's response to feel comfortable that my comments were actually listened to as intended. Thank you for listening.
So Dave, thanks for the question. I'm happy to reply to that. The intent of that whole bit was because the concern from residents about how much our reserves had dipped since 2019, or how much they were anticipated to dip by the end of this year. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of concern about it. And as close as I can tell, and Joe, you can be a lot more focused on this, but there were really 3 areas where our reserves probably got hit hardest. One was we had $100,000 in road repairs. We had about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was about a little over $120,000 in equity that was required to complete and finish the building. And then the other one was the consultancy that all of those together combined to create a draw, and people were concerned about where our balances were. Those were the reasons, some of the reasons for that. And I think it's the board's intent that we want to build those reserves back up. We want to be able to look forward and look at our reserve plan and be able to fund those upcoming reserve requirements. And the only way to do that is to every year continue to build that reserve. Joe, if you want to articulate that a little bit more specifically, help yourself.
To Dave's question, and thanks, Doug. One of the things that I identified a few months ago was that there is approximately $300,000 to $400,000 in, let's just call it equity, in the building as compared to the debt that's being held on the building. So if you look at the total reserve that we had at the beginning of 2021, according to the AGM package, and then you look at what it was going to go down to, we should be able to add that amount of money to come up with, let's just use the term, an effective reserve, if you use the building being equity. Now, from my perspective, and this is not about me, I don't know that our community wants to be in the home or the property ownership arena where we've got a building worth X, and it is an asset, as Dave mentioned, with debt of Y. And so we've got equity tied up, which will be very difficult to utilize against some of the potential issues that we're going to be faced with roads and drainage, etc. So I don't know that I have much to add. Doug, as you know, I've only been involved for just under 2 weeks, but over the next few months, it's going to be high on my list to identify all aspects of spending, both in the reserve and the operation, that are of significance that maybe we can either save or cut back on so that we have a better future looking forward without having to raise dues considerably. Thank you.
Okay. Doug, Joe, thank you. Dave, I hope that was
Can
helpful.
I just make a small comment?
Sure.
I agree with what Joe's saying, and if we put our building assets as a reserve, I'd be a little concerned about that because the reserve is intended to be there for emergencies. So if we had an earthquake, do you sell your building to pay for the destruction? I don't know. We'll talk about that later, but appreciate the answer though.
Yeah, no, I think those are fair comments. Good. Lori, who do we have next?
Next up is Jonathan Huggett.
Thanks very much. Hopefully, moderator, I'll make this quick and appreciate an interactive process. Just quickly to introduce myself, my wife and I, Carolyn, have been 10-year residents in Golden Eye Lane in Turnberry Wood. And this might be
mailing that will party.
I'm sorry?
I think somebody needs to mute maybe.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Sorry. Yeah, this might be a very short question, depending on the answer, or it might elicit a bunch of follow-up questions. So I'll keep the front-end questions short. I understand that the board might have entered into a recent agreement involving Carnoustie and Drayton Hillside, and that agreement is confidential. And so my first question, which might negate all other questions, is, does such an agreement exist? And then if it does exist, the follow-up question would be, why is that agreement confidential? And what is the scope of the agreement? And then moderator, I'll hand it back to you.
Laurie, let me answer that. The agreement isn't necessarily confidential. There is an agreement that was entered into for the SRA to be paid for the cost of the improvements or the repairs to the bioswale. And in that agreement, like is very common in commercial negotiations, there is a confidentiality clause. But SRA, Community Home, the Semiahmoo Residents Association, is a party to that agreement. So really, there shouldn't be any confidentiality amongst our residents. And basically, the deal was that they paid us money, enough money that is escrowed so that we can fix that. And the reason that they did that is because the Semiahmoo LLC that had inherited the property through bankruptcy did not want to have anything to do with fixing that property until they actually had a buyer lined up. Now they've got a buyer lined up, and that sale is going forward. And so as a condition, because we were in a position to require it, we made it a condition that they had to put that money up before that sale could go through. So that's what the Carnoustie deal is about. Alec, if you want to be more clear on it than that, feel free to log in. But you know, there's really nothing that's confidential to the community as it relates to that transaction.
I didn't intend to speak much tonight, but I negotiated that deal with Semiahmoo LLC, who had been reluctant to fix the bioswale, which was clearly their responsibility for the last 2 years. The city tested the bioswale. The bioswale failed because the bottom has fallen out of it due to negligent maintenance. It was the responsibility of the declarant of the Carnoustie Homeowners Association, Semiahmoo LLC, to do that. We simply insisted that if they were not going to perform that job, we wanted enough money in escrow, and not even in escrow, in our attorney's trust account, in order to perform the engineering and the construction necessary to rebuild that bioswale. The confidentiality agreements are in that document, I suppose, because just like any of you, if we're talking about money flowing out of your pocket to someplace else, or if we're talking about things you haven't done around your property for the last 2 years, you don't want your name broadcast across the community. Thanks.
And moderator, could I follow up?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
So very briefly, and thank you for your detailed answers, much appreciated. I know, I'm just wondering what the appropriate forum is to share that agreement, because I think there's a number of people who would just like to read it. Not that we doubt you, Alec, or anything that you say. Is it appropriate that you would post it either on the SRA website where we could download it, or, and another one that's very common, because this happens all the time in government, if there are specific issues that the document needs to be redacted before it's posted, I wouldn't have a problem if redactions, providing there was an indication of what has been redacted, if it's a personal name, or a Visa card number or anything like that, that is perfectly reasonable on a privacy issue to redact part of the agreement, that wouldn't be a problem to me. I think that would be beneficial to everybody to post the agreement with appropriate redactions so that everybody can read it for their satisfaction. Thank you.
The confidentiality agreements are fairly common. We have already reached out to our counsel and asked him to reach out to Semiahmoo LLC's counsel and the counsel of Next Adventure, who has already entered into an agreement to buy the rest of Carnoustie, thus our haste in getting this done. And we have asked for a waiver on the confidentiality paragraph so that we can indeed share it. The next step would be, if that's not acceptable to them, we'll ask them if we can redact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And final comment, moderator, and then my time's used up. Sure. That's fine. I appreciate that. And just a comment without accusing anybody of anything. I always find in government that as soon as somebody writes confidentiality, there's a whole group of people immediately go, what are they trying to hide? So I think it is important that I understand, third-party negotiations, private business enterprises, all those kinds of things. I think it is important we find a way to share that document so that everybody can read it. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Okay. Lori, let's see who else is in line and anything else we want to talk about.
Okay, that would be April Hashimoto.
Can I just start?
Dive right in.
Okay, my name is April Hashimoto. I live on Golden Eye Lane in Turnberry Wood. At the last town hall, I presented some numbers. I referred to the drop in the cash balance from the end of 2019 to the projected cash balance at the end of 2021, dropping by $394,000 or $397,000. So I'll just round that to a $400,000 if nobody minds. So I have a couple of questions just about how we recover from that situation. We bring in the 2021 budget, we bring in $800,000 of revenue from homeowners' dues. And our cash balance has dropped by about $400,000, or is projected to drop by the end of 2021. So what I would like to know, if anybody is prepared to discuss or describe it, is what type of timeline does the board see in recovering that $400,000, building back that $400,000 when we really only have $800,000 a year in revenue to work with? And if we are going to build it back, sorry, I'll pile on the questions. If we are going to build it back, how long would that take to do? And what other projects would we have to delay or defer in order to accomplish that? And then, sort of as a side question to that, how much road was repaired for the $98,000 that was spent in 2020? Just so that we can have an idea of what kind of expenditure that's going to require into the future. I noticed it's about that was like $98,000 in 2020. It was projected to be $105,000 in 2021. It's one of the bigger expenditures. So I would just like to know how many miles or what distance of road that is covering in each year.
I'll hand that back either to Doug or to Joe.
Oh, she's on the phone.
I will attempt to answer the first part of the question. So to April's question, one of the reasons why a number of you on this call and outside of this call know that I joined the board is because it was important to me and to very many people in the community that the money that we put into the SRA is spent in the best way possible. That does never mean the cheapest way possible. It certainly doesn't mean to not do things that need to be done and delay them until another day. It means to look at all the projects that we've got or budgeted for and identify whether they are needs or whether they're wants or desires. So I've only been on the board for a few days. I have not had a chance to look at the remainder of the 2021 budget, but a couple of items that are in the budget, both on the operating side and on the reserve side, that I have identified that we can reduce significantly are the projected accounting costs until the end of the year, because I'm going to step in and do a bunch of them for no money until we identify someone. And then on the reserve side, if you look, I'm not going to answer about the road at this moment in time, but I will answer about the $65,000 that is sitting as design costs for the new building, which I believe is intended to be interior finishings. So those total in excess of $100,000 in the first blush. Couple of things that we've identified we can not necessarily cut, but reduce significantly. And I plan to go through a process with the rest of the board and staff and residents in some focus group meetings to identify what are some of the ideas that they think are important, whereas we as the board might think are of different importance, and to try and get the residents to understand and see and us to agree on certain amounts of money that need to be spent versus certain amounts of money that don't need to be spent. I know I'm not answering specific definitive answers about how to build it up, but my goal is to spend only what we need to spend in this calendar year, come up with a projection through the end of the year, and then, as you all know, in 6 months or 7 months, we've got an AGM. Well in advance of then, we are planning to have a couple more town halls as we hit the summertime, when there's going to be a lot of residents here, because people generally come here in the summertime, to inform them and participate in discussions about 2022.
In the charter.
So I hope that that sort of answers April's question on that. As far as the road goes, I'm hoping that someone who was on the board can answer that question as to how much of the road was actually paved or resurfaced for the $98,000 in 2020.
Go ahead, Alec.
I wasn't on the project, and the allocation of the funds for the repair, which took place in Boundary Ridge, that 100,000 that you refer to was authorized either 2 or 3 years prior to my participation on the board. However, one of my concerns, and I think this addresses April's question fairly directly, is that if we paid $100,000 to fix or repave 500 feet of road, how is it possible that we set our reserve current value, discounted value, for each mile of road at $80,000 times 14 miles of roads, and believe that that was an adequate reserve? One of the issues that we've identified as a problem. Just as a informational comment, we are required to do a reserve study, and so there are a number of reserve companies out there who provide such services. They take the numbers you give them and then they project them forward at an interest rate to see if they satisfy the ultimate need. This board did not give the reserve company an $80,000 per mile estimate. That was done well prior, and I have tried to get a revised number because I think our reserves will be not just considerably, but probably critically short as these roads are now anywhere from 30 to 20 years old, depending on when things were developed. So I can't see how you get into the future without revising the baseline for all of the reserve studies. It's been a concern of mine for 2 years, and I've not been able to get anybody to get me a estimate for the cost of a mile of road. Certainly 500 feet of road at 100,000 does not equate to us being able to maintain these roads. And then I would add to that, I'm going to finish.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
We have things under the roads called storm drains. And until last year, they hadn't been reserved for at all. And I'll close with that.
Okay. I mean, some of that maybe we park a little bit, obviously raising the concern about reserves. April, anything else? We've gone over all the, albeit you didn't have your full 5 minutes. Any other specific question before I open up to anybody else?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, April, just anything else.
Well, I guess, well, thanks, Joe and Alec. I think that the only thing I would like to wrap up with is that if our reserve currently shows 85% funded, projected to be 85% funded to the end of 2021, and we believe that the actual basis of the reserve for one of our biggest expenses is understated, and we're trying to build back our reserve and our operating fund with only $800,000 a year of revenue coming in, then it seems to me that there's already a pretty steep hill to climb to get back to where we were before financially. Yeah. That's all I'll say to wrap up.
Okay. Well, this may come up some more with some other discussion. I think what I'll do is open it up to see anybody else has questions or comments, and that's important points. Lori?
I have a request for somebody to jump the line, so to speak, because the question is in regards to roads, or they want to make the comment in regards to the roads specifically. I'll leave that up to your discretion.
I'm fine as long as we make it succinct. It's we're on the topic. I'm fine with that. I hope everybody.
Okay, and then April is also requesting additional, so I don't know if and Peggy has yielded her time to her earlier, so I don't know if you want April to go to the end of the line, but we'll go ahead and let Greg make his comments. Greg make his comments regarding roads first, and then you can tell me if April's going to jump the line as well or wait.
I'll make a decision on that. No worries. Again, we want to open dialogue. Go ahead, Greg.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much for letting me jump in here. I wanted to clarify about these roads. Back as probably early as 2016, I think Buzz was president at that time. We had the city of Blaine come out, their expert on roads, come out and take a look at our roads. And we, at that time, knew that our roads were going to cost approximately $1 million a mile to repair. Now, just because the roads are going to cost $1 million a mile to repair, we're not going to repair them all at once, number one. Number two, in the reserve study, what we need to do is plan for the next probably 10, 15 years for repairs on those roads. So those large expenses would be spread out over a longer period of time. And to Alex's comment, I have no idea where we got $80,000 a mile. Usually cost $80,000 like a quarter of a mile if you're lucky. So just wanted to bring that the board, as far back as 2016, knew what those roads were going to cost. We did investigation, we got quotes on it, and that, you know, having that money in reserve right now is not really necessary, but we need to plan for it in the next 10, 15, 20 years for replacement of roads. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Sensible.
Anybody else, board, have a comment on that? Otherwise, I'm fine to go back to April for a few minutes.
Actually, April her comment is not regarding roads, so she's going to move to the end. I do have a request from Jonathan Huggett to make a comment about roads, and I do have another homeowner that has yielded 5 minutes, so I don't think that would be unreasonable to let Jonathan make his comment.
Go ahead, Jonathan. Like, what is the topic? Make sure everybody has a chance to speak and get into other topics, but this is an important one. So, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I think it is important. Should tell you, for my sins, I'm an engineer as well. Don't hold that against me, with a lot of highway experience. And I can tell you the world over that the biggest problem on road maintenance is always heavy trucks, that you can run standard autos on a road for 50 years and you won't see any damage. And you can run a few heavy trucks on a road and you are going to see damage. And so the question then comes, part of this process is going to be policing the heavy trucks. And also when other developments take place, resulting in this huge amount of, we've got 2 or 3 going on right now, we need to be very vigilant about the damage that these trucks do. And it's not unusual for any highways authority to come in after the fact and say, you know what, you've damaged our roads in that area by the constant use of heavy trucks. You need to contribute to the repair of those roads.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Good. Laura?
Okay, it will be Buzz Abercrombie commenting now.
Okay, Buzz, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A couple of different things, if I may. First, as a member of the concerned citizens, I hope that you will accept what I'm going to say next in the sincerity that it is meant. Our issue has never been with the board's sincerity and its intention to do the right thing. Our differences have been with the course of action and the board feeling strongly that it had to follow its own direction despite where a large segment of the membership felt it needed to go. I do want to add my thanks to those people who have thanked Alec. I've been on the board for 4 years, so I really do understand the level of commitment that it takes and the level of time that it takes. And surely Alec has done that and then some. So I hope you will accept, Alec, my thanks, my personal thanks for that, and accept the sincerity that it was never a matter of person. It was a matter of policy and substance that we disagreed on. So having said that, let me make one comment on the reserves, if I may. I do believe that we probably have a potentially larger liability in the roads than the numbers seem to show. I believe that. Now, having said that, it makes it more difficult for me to accept that if everybody else believes that, what made it okay to tap into those reserves for other purposes? I just can't figure out how that works. So let me leave that at that and switch subjects, if I may. I think we're at a junction here where the board is either looking at or considering a change in direction. I hope it is. And with that in mind, let me deposit something with you for food for thought. The presentations of the town halls before this prominently featured benchmarking a number of times. Many of the people attending this town hall today have probably been on a benchmarking trip. I definitely have been on my fair share of them. Probably the most important thing that I have taken away from them is that successful organizations always, no exception, have a laser focus on their customers. The key question is always, how do we provide what the customer wants? Figuring that out is usually not that hard. Delivering it day in, day out is what makes success. The customer simply wants a product or a service of consistently good quality and a fair price. It should be delivered on time. And if their needs change, they want you to be nimble and responsive. The customer does not give a whit whether you are the world champion of general ledger accounting, or have an inspiring mission statement, or conduct all your meetings under Robert's Rules of Order. They don't even care to know about it. Every organization has customers. In the case of the SRA, all of us, the members, are the customers. The SRA's product is the upkeep and improvement of the common property, which include the infrastructure. The members, we want consistently good quality. We want it on time and at a reasonable price. And should the needs change, we expect the association to be responsive. That's really the whole scope of it. All the other stuff, well, like customers out in the outside world, I doubt whether many members care about it. It's overdue, in my opinion, for the SRA to get back to its basics, its core.
And Buzz, you have about 30 seconds. I am going to cut you off.
Fix the roads, manage the stormwater, keep the ponds clean, beautify the entrances, etc. Do it on time and at a reasonable cost. All the other stuff, it probably leaves many people unmoved. And that's what I had to say.
Thank you, Buzz. I don't know if anybody on the board has any comments or want to move on. I'll open up. Steve?
Okay, next up.
Lori, I want to say something.
Yeah,
hey, Buzz.
Yeah.
Buzz, the Steve Geisels. Thank you for your comments. I agree completely. We've got to get back to the fundamentals